Hello, my name is Mino Vlachos, and I am the managing director and co founder of the Three Peak Group. With Three Peak, we work with CEOs of mid sized companies to support them during their growth phase. So we help them to scale from a relational system where everyone knows everyone to an organized system where we enable organized structures but maintaining human connection.
Hi everyone, I'm Shruti Chaudhary. I am part of Avomind. I lead the dark team within Avomind. We are a boutique recruitment firm focusing on commercial strategy and analytics talent globally. We love working with companies that are looking to expand into new areas, looking for very niche roles or scaling up very, very quickly. Speed is our core value, and we work globally. We have teams based in Berlin, Jakarta, Barcelona, and Toronto. We do come with a very extensive global network, and I'm super happy to be here.
Wonderful. And what I love about us working together, Shruti, Three Peak, Avomind, is we get to see similar topics, but from two very different angles. So we support with consulting companies and some of the kind of inner decision making and capabilities that they're building. And then Avomind is really helping with the recruitment and supporting them to find the right talent. So our mini series is going to be focused on finding the right senior leaders. So one of the core competencies and needs of organizations as they're building and growing is finding the right senior leaders. So we're going to break this mini series into four parts, and we're going to be looking at four different components when it comes to finding the right senior leaders. So our mini series is on hiring the right leaders, and we've arrived at the moment where we're going to be talking about how to assess and screen for talent. So you've identified the need for someone, you have an understanding of the role, and you kind of have a little bit of a structure, expectations set out. And now you're actually going to be meeting with people and trying to figure out, well, how do I even begin to assess or to understand who I should be working with? And so, Shruti, I know you have deep expertise and experience with interviewing people, looking for candidates. And so, I'd like to just begin there. When you're first starting to kind of meet with folks, screen with folks, what are some of the things that you start to look for? What are some best practices? What's going on inside the mind of the recruiting side? Because I think us sometimes as candidates, we'd love to know like what's happening on your side of things.
So, as a recruit, I can't really quantify it, but I think the gut says a lot. It's important to find the vibe of the person and the small flags that you would see, both positive and negative. Like
Mm,
if someone's walking into the office, how do they greet people other than the stakeholders or who they're going to be speaking with? Very small thing, but very important to understand humility, how they are as a person. So I would say keep a very close eye on the positive and the negative indicators. Are they arrogant in any way? Are they a little bit of know-it-all kind of a person? Are they able to talk about their achievements without really taking all of the credit?
mm,
Do they tend to learn from their mistakes? First of all, do they really talk about their mistakes openly or not? And if they do they tend to blame it on other people or other teams or other external factors? Or are they taking ownership, responsibility, and talking about, all right, this happened, this is what we did, and this is what could have changed?
mm.
So I think these are some small things that kind of come out as you speak with them. And one important thing that I always ask anybody that I'm speaking to is what is it that they are looking for in a role? Like the top 3 or 5 things that would matter to them. And you'd be surprised by how many senior folks cannot answer that question
Mm.
without thinking a lot about it or being very vague about it. So that's like a simple indicator to me. If this person does not really know what they want,
Mm,
how do they know if this is the right fit or not for them?
mm.
So it's small things like these that can really tell you what this person is actually about. on paper may be a great candidate, but when you speak with them, if they are not respecting your time, for example, a lot of times people would cancel calls once, twice. The third time it happens, it's a big red flag.
Mm,
So it's these small behavioral aspects that I tend to focus on, especially initially, and that really helps me a lot. And I know we talk more about this aspect, but it's important to kind of also let go of your own bias as an
mhm,
interviewer or as somebody who's evaluating, because you tend to like people who are like you
mm.
or who are similar in behavior, in thought process. And it's always important to keep that in mind before taking a call.
I feel like there's this old, I don't know if it's old school or just is the way it still is done. It's been a while because I have my own company now. It's been a while since I interviewed. I feel like the old school, at least paradigm, is that like I'm a candidate, I come to you, and like you ask me questions, and I sit there and I smile and I answer all the questions as best as I can. And at some point, like of my career, I remember I was up for when I was working at a different company before I started my own, and I was interviewing with another company, and it was a big brand, like it was like one of the best in our industry. So like I think they were used to just like that mode where like they were asking the questions. I'd said, but I actually really didn't know if I wanted to work there, so I asked them a lot of questions. Like I really wanted to understand the role. I really want to understand the culture. I want to understand my responsibilities, the travel, like involved. And I'm wondering, like, from your side of things, like, what do you feel is like a great interview? Is it like you ask all the questions and they sit there smiling and answer? Is it a dialogue? Are they asking their questions? Like, do you want them to be asking kind of like real questions to understand what's happening? Give us a little bit of your side on the recruitment, like what you would say is a good interview.
Absolutely, yes. If the candidate is not asking any questions, it's a big red flag.
Mm-hmm.
It means they are either not interested or they don't know what they're getting into. So it's very important. It shows their engagement with the role if they're
Yeah.
asking the questions. It shows that they're genuinely interested. They are trying to figure out the alignment with the company. It's not a one-way deal, right? It's also the candidate who is evaluating the organization in this case. So it's very important on the questions. I would say it's also important what kind of questions do they ask. Is it just, how much money am I going to make, or will I get this car or not? Or is it more about what is the culture? What is it that I'm going to do? What are the challenges that are going to come my way when I enter this space? What is it that's waiting for me in the company? I think those are the kind of questions that tell you, yeah, this person could be a good fit.
Yeah.
We had small example that comes to my mind. We had like this very senior sales leader. Everything is in place. The interviews went great. And when it comes to the offer, this person declined the offer because they did not get a specific car that they wanted.
Okay.
And that's a real scenario.
Wow.
And that's where the company realized it was a good mistake,
Mm.
it turned out well for them in the long run because could have been gone down really badly.
Mm. So what it
So
sounds
yeah,
like I'm
for sure.
hearing is like it's really important. Like we're really talking about a fit and an alignment. So like you want individuals who are really aligned with the direction of the company, the values. They really are going to join a culture and become a part of it. And so it seems like this alignment fit thing is like a very it's on your mind. It seems to me.
Absolutely. And I think that's where I, as a recruiter, can also add value, right?
Mm.
I cannot probably evaluate folks on their specific technical skills or hard skills.
Yeah.
What I look at when evaluating people is, will this person be a good culture fit? Will this person really be, is this person hardworking if that's what the organization is looking for? That alignment aspect is very important. And the sooner you kind of identify that, the better it is for both parties, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my experience is more on the executive assessment side. So I spent many years assessing leaders, and that was sometimes for development. So a leader wants to improve within the company, but often it was for recruitment, so selection. We would really look at is what are the leadership skills and capabilities that this leader would bring. So what I find is like there's so many different areas that one needs to look at, especially for senior leaders. So there's a technical aspect, like you mentioned. There's a culture fit. There's like values, relational, and then there's also this bucket called leadership skills, which is really hard to actually assess for. And of course, you can look at past experience and say like, well, have you done it before? But it doesn't necessarily give you the quality, unless you're doing reference checks, which is also another tool that is available for many companies is reference, right? Check. Okay. And reference checks, if you look at like the data, they are quite good actually at like we could talk about the yeah, is it comfortable or uncomfortable, but they're actually quite good at getting some picture. Just like with when you're within an organization, 360, so getting data, getting stakeholder feedback tends to be a really great way to actually improve self awareness and understand how someone's doing. uh, on the recruitment side, I think like selection, when you do these reference checks, it can actually be quite impactful and give you a lot of rich information.
I was just going to elaborate more on that, right? Reference checks and background checks are some of the most underplayed tools that organizations use,
Yeah.
especially owing to the cost, owing to the increase in timeline. When it comes to smaller organizations, they usually let it go. But it's a very important step. It can give you a very good insight on what the person actually is. In fact, a very recent example, this lady, again, aces the interviews. Everybody loves her, product lead. And when it comes to reference check, she just suddenly ghosts. It's no response from her, nothing, absolute ghosting.
Mm,
So reference checks are very, very high on my tool list, so to say, when it comes to evaluating leaders. And also, one thought that's coming to my mind is the loop interviews. I really like them. I think they're a great way to evaluate different facets of a person or like do a more 360 evaluation. So essentially, it is 5, 6 straight rounds of interviews where each interview evaluates a certain value that the company has. It's not eliminatory, but it's each interview on a different value that they're
mm,
looking at, which is super great. It gives you good insight on whether there's a balance or not, whether this person's high on one set of value, maybe too low on the other. In most cases, it might not work out.
mm.
If there's a consistency, maybe a better fit. So I think, yeah, that's again a very good tool that many companies are using right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I had for a very brief moment in my career, I had done some referencing work. So I've seen the utility of it. And again, the data speaks for itself when you look at the research of kind of how to get good information on candidates. What I found is, I'll give just a quick example is like when you're doing reference checking and you're talking to let's say I talked to 10 people for the same candidate, you can just hear qualitatively like some people will give you like most people are going to just give you some version of like they're good. Okay, but within that, because that if they're going to be referred, then usually they're going to give some positive, but you can hear the quality is like, are they ecstatic, like they're really happy, they were really excited about the individual, or is it like, yeah, they were fine, they were good, and when you really talk to someone and you try and get them to open and talk for 20, 30 minutes about someone, you can get a sense pretty quickly about like the degree and scale of like how good actually is this person, or if you're asking good questions, you can start to really understand, well, what did this person actually contribute to the organization. So it's, I think, a very good tool. But let's say you use it or don't use it. I'll introduce another tool, which is the one that I was doing a lot of, which is the executive assessment. And at the level that we're talking about, a lot of what we are looking for is leadership skills, which are notoriously difficult to assess for. One of the holy grails, I won't go so deep into executive assessment because it's a whole science and art in and of itself, but one of the holy grails of the assessment is essentially the exam question is, can we predict this person's behavior in this context? And that's what everyone wants to know, is like, if I put this individual in this context, can I predict how they're going to behave? Are they going to do the thing I want them to do? Are they not going to do it? How are they going to do it? And so the whole exercise becomes this predictive behavioral prediction exercise. Executive assessment, there's many different ways of doing it, but the way that I was trained and the way that I'm biased towards is you're essentially looking to triangulate behavior. So you're looking for different data points to see how a person would likely react in certain situations. We use online psychometric tests. So these are online leadership tests. Not all of them are created equal. I always feel like I have to say that. So there's some tests that are very popular out there that have very little to no science backing them. And there's some out there that have a lot of science kind of backing them. So that's one data point, right? So you can start to look at like some of the things we've talked about in this series, or things around like humility, things around learning aptitude. Like you can assess for that. There are certain attributes that, because we have a lot of statisticians and people working on this stuff all day, that we can see that some traits or some behaviors tend to be more important than others for success in a corporate kind of leadership environment. So you can start to test for those. So that's one, is like you collect like actual data points and look at the tests. What I do though is like I usually do an interview with someone for 3 or 4 hours. I sit with them for 4 hours,
Wow.
yeah, and I go deep into like how they developed as a human being, as a employee, as a leader, and looking at the behaviors, the values, the skills that they've picked up on, and constantly again trying to do this triangulation of like, well, I have all these different data points, how does this actually make sense with all the other data points? And by the end of it, what we try to do is get to a point where we can say, I believe that generally speaking, this is how this person is going to be in this context. I think they would be really great, I think it would be okay, or actually this isn't a good fit, like this is not the right person for you. So from that, like what I'm trying to do is also work with the candidate themselves to help them understand, in the reverse, what is the organization, because they also have actually a lot of questions that sometimes they don't feel comfortable asking because they know they're being constantly observed. And for whatever reason, in the rapport that I'm able to build, and I just give them honest insights also about the culture, the role, because I believe this thing of like having a good fit is the most paramount. It's the most important thing. So I want to make sure that like both parties, both sides have the full information possible so that they can make the best decision for each respectively. And so I've had a lot of people that I've actually assessed for selection, told them like, hey, like this is the context, told the organization, hey, this is the leader. They end up not getting the job or not taking the job or not wanting to, like it's a mutual maybe thing. And then later they'll come to me and say, actually, like, thank you so much. You're totally right. Like that wasn't a good fit for me. And there's an appreciation from the organization and from the leader that we didn't waste like a bunch of time and money and put someone through something that ultimately would have been a failure.
Very interesting. What are some of the other tools that you use? So you talked about certain psychometric tests which can collect data. You spend a lot of time with the person, with the leader in question to gauge them better. What are some of the other tools that you use to kind of evaluate leaders?
So there's a series of things that, like, if we talk about like best practices that enable you to try to again increase the percentage. So the whole goal in a way is, if you were just to do a 50-50 coin flip on someone, right, like, and you just decided by coin toss, can we improve beyond coin toss when we hire people? And some people, because of their biases, which we'll get into in the next kind of episode, can even be worse than 50-50. So sometimes we're worse than 50-50. Sometimes at best we are at 50-50. The question is, can we improve beyond 50-50? So there's certain tools we can use to get beyond 50-50. Very important, like we talked about in the last episode, to have a clear job description, clear job expectations. We need to understand what we're assessing for. So we have to have a list of skills, criteria, that we're like, if we don't have what we can evaluate against, then we're doing a very generic, like, is this person like good or not good? Like, what does that even mean? Because it's so context dependent. So I would say that goes a long way. because then a lot of other tools build off of that. So then you do psychometrics, but depending on the role, the psychometrics don't really tell you much per se. So let's say you have a role where you need a very kind of sociable leader. It's a culture where everyone's very kind, very kind of empathetic. Then if you take a psychometric test and they say you're high on agreeableness, then you can say, great, it's a good fit for this organization. But good agreeableness doesn't necessarily mean they're a good leader. It just means it's a good fit for this role or this environment. So you want to look at things in the context of the culture and the role. This is a bit of a, it's not very popular to talk about, but it is just what seems to come out in the literature and the research again and again, is that intelligence has a very kind of high predictive value on being seen as a leader. And up to a certain threshold, it's actually makes you an effective leader. So it's just tough because that's something that like is a trait that by the time you hit the working age doesn't really change afterwards that much. So it's a little bit unpopular because in our politics we like to say things are meritocratic and like you could just work hard. And so intelligence being more of a fixed attribute after a certain age tends to be a little bit unpopular to talk about, but it does seem to be one of the biggest predictors of leadership performance up until a certain range. So that's another thing you could do is cognitive tests, leadership tests. There's some recent research that's come out that I think is really interesting that actually is showing that even way beyond intelligence, one of the most predictive things you can actually have a leader do is have a simulation where you ask them to allocate resources. So resource allocation games. So if you only have, so much resources, how do you put them in the right pots, in the right pools to optimize a system, which in a way is a lot of what leadership in a company is prioritization, strategic thinking, resource allocation, and that does not correlate with intelligence, which is I guess good. Going back to the meritocratic kind of philosophical part, it's good. It means that like anyone actually could be a leader if they're good at resource allocation and strategic thinking. So those are some, and systems and functions and roles and job descriptions. So we're kind of back to the same thing, which is
Right.
your capacity to do that is. And the final thing is like I think the cool thing about executive assessment is you're seeing the human in their fullness. So by spending 4 hours with someone and talking about, I usually start my assessments by going through early life. So I start with them as a kid and go through school, university, highs and lows of their career, like what they've learned, different skills they've picked up, how they think, how they relate, how they manage teams. Like by the end of it, they actually have so many insights and of their own patterns and of the way that they operate. So it's cool for them, and I get a deep understanding of, you can see a test score, but what does that really tell you? There's a whole story behind it that I believe adds the real flavor and color, the qualitative information that you need to make a decision.
Super cool, super cool. I think that intelligence factor, very interesting. It's not considered important in a lot of cases, and that actually reminds me of an example. One of the companies that I worked with, their founder would always do this GCA test, which was general cognitive ability. And as a recruiter, that used to be the final round, and the number of candidates who got rejected there, it hurt a little bit,
Yeah.
But now I can so relate to that. It was essentially a simulation of how this person would act on the job. And yeah, now I kind of understand where he was coming from or what that meant for the organization. Very interesting.
Yeah, if we go a little bit into the nuance, this is where these are tricky. One is not all tests are created equal again, even within the cognitive testing, and some of them do have biases. So, what we've seen in the United States, at least, is some of the tests, the way they've been produced, can have racial bias or gender bias. So, you have to use a very good test, first of all. Second is there's a really kind of core concept in leadership literature between leadership emergence and leadership efficacy. Emergence just means people see you as a leader. And intelligence is one of the biggest predictors of being seen as a leader. And then there's this other concept called leadership efficacy, which is like, are you good at leadership? Are you a good, like, are you an effective leader? When it comes to intelligence, it's clear you're seen as a leader. It gets a little bit more murky when it comes to, are you an effective leader? And it seems to be there's like a threshold, there's a cutoff where leadership improves with intelligence roughly, I'm going to put some rough numbers, but like let's say around like above average. Once you start getting above average, it doesn't matter as much anymore. There's other things that then start to play a bigger role in how effective you are as a leader. So use this with a grain of salt, but like generally speaking, if you are going to do these cognitive tests, don't go crazy. Like I've seen companies where they're like, oh, they have to be like 90th percentile or 95th percentile. And it's like, actually, that's probably not that important. Like, if you do want to use it, like, is someone above average? That's good enough. Like, even 51st percentile, like, whatever, is like, if you are going to, and don't use that. I would not use it the way you described, honestly. I would never reject someone because of a cognitive
So,
test. I would use it as one data point amongst many, because like people who, what I've seen in my career, people who are on the high ends of intelligence start to have a lot of other issues where they tend to think too fast, they tend to think in too much complexity. The fact is, you are going to be working with a bell curve of intelligence, so you're going to be working with a lot of people who are in the average overall. If you are so fast and so smart, you're going to have a very tough time leading people who are the majority of people to an outcome, because you're not slowing down and giving them the steps to get from A to B to C. So there are actually a lot of hindrances that could start to come up with heightened levels of intelligence that don't always get talked about.
all right. So, if there was one takeaway that you would talk about from this episode, what would it be?
For me, and maybe it ends up being a recurring pattern in these series, but I think a lot of the leadership at senior levels, one, you need to have the clear job description for them so that you know what you're looking for, and then you can assess and even have clear like idea of like this concept of culture is so vague. So like, what does that really mean? What are the true lived values that you're assessing for? So understand what are the criteria you're assessing someone against, whether that's cultural, technical, leadership. And then like in general, something that I'm more and more interested in is when you are evaluating someone, I think this cool new part of research is how adept is this other person at allocating resources themselves. So can they make job descriptions? Can they like put things in functional roles? Can they create systems? And I think that's kind of the new untapped area of like leadership and leadership assessment that we're going to see more and more in the next, like, say, 5 years. I think there's a very good strong case that we'll be assessing people's ability to allocate resources more. So practice that, and also that's good leadership, I think. So it's in a weird way, I'm like, oh, we've kind of arrived back at this core competency is something that is predictive of good leadership. And you, Shruti,
Amazing.
what would you kind of, what's one advice you would give when it comes to this topic?
I would totally resonate with what you said. It's very important to have a very clear understanding of what you want, define it quantitatively. I would also say watch your own biases, and the definition automatically helps you kind of watch them, right? If you know that this particular skill is what I'm looking for, it's easier to keep your bias aside rather than just getting mingled up. So, yeah, I think I totally resonate with you and agreed. Yeah.
Super. Thank you, everyone, for listening. In the
Thank
next
you.
episode, we're going to be talking about deal breakers, biases, the kind of shadowy dark side of personality, and how that might play into hiring. So we will see you then. Thank you for listening.